Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of this podcast we've been calling the Man Night Podcast, that all kind of stemmed out of 3 weeks in a row of us getting together, worshiping, having fun, and hearing the Word. Last week we moved into an episode of talking about the power of words and how they can help. And as we move into this next phase, we're going to call the power of self-control. We're going to do things a little bit differently today. We have a special guest in Lee Wimmer and my dad. I know we've talked a little bit about the men's Bible study that's coming up in January. It's going to be on Friday morning, starting the third Friday in January. And as we move into that, Dad's going to be the one who leads us through the book of Titus. And so as we talk through self-control, it's hard to read the book of Titus without dwelling on and recognizing that self-control is a huge theme. And some could say even the theme of Titus. And so Dad's here to help us kind of shape and frame some things, and then gives a little bit of look into what that study is going to look like. So, Dad, as we talk through the theme of Titus being self-control, what does that stir up, or what are some things that point us towards that being true?
Well, in asking about self-control, then yes, absolutely, the book of Titus has a theme kind of woven throughout it. And it's addressed not once, not twice, but multiple times by Paul as he writes to his fellow servant, our fellow server of Titus, that he's there on the island of Crete, that this church has just blown up. It's become led by men who are not teaching truth, men who are corrupt. And so this letter to Titus, he says first thing in verse 5, the first thing you've got to do in fixing the church is go out and find godly men. Don't go find good men.
That's good.
Don't go find politically correct men. Don't go find socially connected men. Go out and find men of God. And in doing so, that's where self-discipline, as I say, is woven throughout. And when we do the Titus 10, those are 10 attributes that in the writing of the letter to Paul, that there are 10 attributes that we see as foundational things, foundational characteristics that we as men need to have in godly men. Because when Paul said, go find them, he didn't leave them hanging. He said, okay, here's what they look like.
That's right. That's
and
good.
they look like things like authority and doctrine and the gospel and character. And we look at character, that's where the self-control comes in. Because in the letter, Paul does talk about positive aspects of using self-control to build us up, but also there are negative things that self-control, when not present, occurs. So let me close real quick. There's a book on our coffee table called The Treasury of Prayer by E.M. Bounds. And he writes, conduct is what we do. Character is what we are. Character is the internal operating from within with use of self-control.
That's good. That is good. Well, like I said, as we go into the new year, guys, I hope you'll click on www.warren.church and go register for this great study of Titus. We're going to go through those Titus 10, those 10 characteristics of a godly man. But Nick, in chapter 1 of Titus, Paul lists negative traits and he lists positive traits. The negative traits of an undisciplined man are arrogant, quick-tempered, a drunkard, violent, and greedy. And then he gives the positive ones, which are hospitable, a lover of good, self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. When you look at that list, the negative traits all kind of flow from a lack of self-control, I think. But why do you think self-control in its own sits at the center of biblical manhood?
Yeah, I think it is it's the gas pedal, so to speak, on anything else that we do as men. Like any of the characteristics that we any of those like fruits of the spirit kind of characteristics, it's the reaction time to that. And so if we don't have a sense of self-control, we're operating with like this like flippancy. Yeah. Whatever comes is what I'm going to do versus I'm going to be measured. I'm going to be thoughtful. I'm going to be in tune with God's spirit. All of those things kind of go out the window when we lack self-control. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. What you said there, inconsistency. I think whether you're in a marriage or you have children or you work at a job or you have friends or just like exist among people, I think the attribute of consistency is valued in relationships. And so even like seeing self-control pop up in those aspects of life is kind of a challenge and encouraging to me too.
Could we also say that there's no expiration on self-control? That in that book of Titus, he addresses to Titus, we need to teach older men about self-control.
That's right.
There is a part about the women need to be taught, the older women to teach the younger women about being godly women. But also at the end, he says, and to young men, you need to learn about self-control. So I don't know if there's ever an expiration date on
That's so good.
self-control.
Good word. That's
Yeah.
good.
Well, and that traces the whole theme of the Bible. It's like the bent of God's people since the fall has been to trust in my own. That's honestly before the fall. The reason that the fall happened is I'm going to trust in my own wisdom, and not trust God's plan for my life. And so that's a lack of self-control and trusting God's plan for me. And so I'm going to step over my skis and so to speak, and really get into a mess because I wasn't willing to have self-control in that moment to trust what God has already told me is true, and the wisdom that He's placed for us to live by.
Yeah, that's good. All that's good. All right. I took 2 points that Stephen shared in his message, and then I took 2 points that Paul kind of shares in the book of Titus. I'm going to read them off to you. Yeah, all 4 of them. They're separated.
Two.
But I'm going to read them off as if they're 4 points from the same sermon, and then just kind of ask you guys what you pull out of these 4 points. Yeah. The first one is a self-controlled man is spirit-led. Second one is a self-controlled man is well-ordered. A self-controlled man requires accountability, and a self-controlled man is self-aware. Any of those stand out to you guys?
I tell you, or I'll use the term, you have teed up for attributes, for things that we will cover in the Titus 10. Let me kind of give you that peek behind the curtain a little bit about some of those sessions we will have. You mentioned that self-controlled man is spirit-led, and he has done so through doctrine. Sound doctrine is intended to be the foundation for that faithful action and being spirit-led. Second thing, you said that a self-controlled man is well-ordered, and that is through his assignments. Identity is about being, but assignments is about doing.
Sure.
All right. Third thing, you said self-controlled man requires accountability, and that is through dominion. We as men, when we take on dominion with a sword and a plow. And in doing so, we are responsible, and then we must care for, and then we must also cultivate through dominion. Yeah. The last one you said there, Trey, was a self-controlled man is self-aware, and that is through his identity. Words may define us, but when we trust and follow Jesus, He redefines us and creates us anew.
Yeah.
Good word.
And that like accountability thing is not something that we, because we love the autonomy as men, right? We love what you were just talking about, like with the sword and the plow. I like to make my own path here. But in doing so, we can often get off the trail a good bit. And what accountability invites is saying, hey, I want you to be walking to me close enough to me to see when I'm off and call that out in me. And that's the humility of the Christian life that we must invite in if we're going to be followers of Jesus that have, which speaks to that self-control of just like, I am going to give over the keys to my full autonomy to some trusted brothers, just a couple that I know have my back and want good for me.
Oh yeah, for sure. Two that stood out to me were self-aware and well-ordered. Self-aware, I say that only because you just don't hear the word a lot. It's not like a normal thing that dudes talk about. But Ryan Leake, in his book Leveling Up, he describes 3 traits of a self-aware man. That's he knows his strengths, he knows his shortcomings, and he knows his impact on others. And so, and the reason I share those, I think, is because when someone says self-aware, it can almost mean, like, almost sound like emotional. Like the world tells us we're not supposed to have emotions. The world tells us we're supposed to be tough. But unless we know our limits and know what we're capable of, and we know how big how much we're impacting others, I don't think we know what we're capable of, right? And God calls us to be the best version of ourselves. And so I just think those are important to highlight.
And we do that in the business world, right?
That's
like
true.
we are well aware of where our money goes as we're spending money and looking at our return on investment and whatever else. And that will hit people differently depending on their line of work. But as fathers and husbands, like we're to be good stewards of our house. And so like there's a self-awareness of what our resources are pouring into and what's actually working and producing fruit and what's not. Yeah. And so in the same way, we absolutely should do that.
Yeah. And why wouldn't we do that to our spiritual life?
That's
like, why would we not? So that's good. The second one I said was well ordered. And when I thought about that, I thought about being a disciplined person or like having good habits, which we talked about in other episodes. And I think we'll do one on some other habits here coming up soon. But one of the biggest misconceptions in Christian growth is that we are to let go and let God. And I think there's an aspect of surrender that's important. I think the statement holds true. But for some reason, there are aspects of the Christian walk where we think we should just let go and let God, and we do nothing, right? And so I wrote down some other things. Like if you look at a golfer, he's not going to get better by thinking about getting better. If you want to get a master's degree, you have to study, If an entrepreneur doesn't succeed an entrepreneur will not succeed by sitting in his office dreaming about success. He has to go do it. In the same way, I think we as believers have to order our lives, discipline our lives, practice self-control in our lives in order to fully be obedient to what God's calling us to do. And so this all stood out to me.
That's good.
So Nick, when we talk about that misconception, of like almost laziness, like we just like passively become better Christians, which is almost, like when I say it that way, it sounds kind of impossible. How does that misconception creep into guys' lives?
Yeah, no, I do think we as men, I think by nature we work hard in our work and the things that are tangible in front of us, and then we have a tendency to kind of unplug and turn off when we come home. And that's when, or like even in our spiritual life, when we first wake up, we're giving our mind to providing for our family and doing some tangibly good things. But I think that when we think about our spiritual life, we're far less disciplined in taking the approach of like, I'm going to pursue the Lord today. I'm going to abide in His presence. I'm going to put in place the systems necessary for me to grow and become a more fruit-bearing follower of Jesus.
Sure.
And so the idea of let go and let God, like you said, the concept of surrender is vital to the Christian life. But let go and let God does not mean passively just float down the stream and I'm going to magically become more like Jesus. Right. There is no, like we've talked about this a couple episodes ago, where like there is no neutral in the Christian life. There's something that is going to be forming me into the image of Christ, and there's something that's going to be forming me into the image of this world. And so Romans 12 very clearly is like, don't be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so like that's a very active, like, I'm taking the steps of discipline to put this in my life to become more like Him.
Yeah.
I don't think that, I agree with your statement of you can't be passive, that you must be active, because I will say that, as Paul was writing to Titus, that there were those 3 sections of, go speak to the elder men to train the younger guys. And one of the things I think that the younger men need to understand is that because if we don't pay attention to those little sins in our lives when we're young, and we think they're just going to go away as we get older, I can tell you those sins and those problems we don't address when we are younger, they don't go away as you get older. They get bigger.
They're a cancer.
Well, no, they get bigger as you get older.
Grow inside, yeah.
So that's where you're right. You can't just be haphazardly, it'll go away, or it won't happen anymore, or that's not who I'm going to be 10 years from now. Unfortunately, that's not right. I mean, it'll get bigger and worse in years to come. So yes, we need to address those when we're young, but at the same time, as those older men, if we think, well, we've made it through those hard times, no, they will also continue to blow up on us as we get older. So it doesn't matter, young or old. We need to make sure pay attention to those and be active in them.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying too, and then we can move on from this, is that you don't just become self-controlled and have discipline in all aspects of your life in one day. You don't just wake up and decide to be self-controlled. It's like, I decided to go on one walk today, or like I make smaller portions at dinner, or like I read the word for 10 minutes a day. It's like small incremental decisions you make that lead to a well-ordered life. It's not all at once. I wake up and like, today's the day I'm self-controlled.
There's I forget what the book this is from, but this has always stood out to me. It talks about a 2-degree shift in our life over time makes dramatic change. And so if you think about an airplane leaving Los Angeles, and if it's aimed at New York City and it makes a 2-degree shift, it actually ends up in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And so over time, a 2-degree shift, it sounds like it's not going to be that big of a deal at all. But if we commit ourselves to a 2-degree shift every day,
that's right,
the change can be huge over a span of time.
That's great. Let's talk about some guys in your life. I know that people have shown up in different ways when you were 5 years old and now when you're 35 or when you're 55 or whatever it is. But can you think about some of those men? What are the characteristics that stand out most that made you feel like they practice self-control or were self-controlled men?
The one that stands out to me is that he knows his mission. There are lots of men that I have looked up to, and even through today, even continue to admire and follow. And the one thing all of them have in common is they all know their mission. As men, we want to get into the fight. As men, we want to fix the wrong and make it right. As men, we want to stand for justice. As men, we want to get into that battle and make something right. The problem is we'll see some men who know their mission, but the dangerous men don't know their mission. They don't know that there is a mission. And when we look at Paul's writings in Titus, he does say that the men must dive into the Word. They must know the Word. They must use that knowledge, and they must use that then to boil over into their passion of serving. That's their mission. That is the mission for us to do, is to love Him, but also know Him and to worship Him daily.
Yeah, I would argue that a man without a mission or a purpose is largely the reason we are where we are culturally in a lot of areas. Meaning we have a lot of maybe people my age and maybe even up into your age who were just given like, hey, congratulations, you graduated high school, now go get a job, and that's not a purpose, That's right. And so I think I agree 100%. I think a man on mission, regardless of whether it's like, I'm going to raise children who are going to be disciples of Jesus, or it's I'm going to build $100 million business, or whatever it is, a man with a goal and a vision and a mission is going to be a force to be reckoned with.
That's right.
And so yeah, I agree 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, all right. Last question I had, maybe just a couple applicable things. Are there any small habits, maybe you, and I think of a couple of myself, in different seasons, maybe not that you're practicing now even, that you've practiced that almost like realigned you when you felt like you were living in a state of not practicing self-control? I said that very wordy. Does that make sense?
Yeah. One of my mentors was modeled so well a self-controlled mouth, meaning like he was one of the few people, he was one of the last to speak when you're in a meeting or you're in a setting where it's quick-witted, jump on, whatever. Mm-hmm. And what that does is it produces in you a humility to not be the first one to speak up into a setting or whatever, but also lets you kind of just like observe other people and speak with like a measured voice. And so that's one of the things I try on a regular basis, is to be slow to speak, and self-controlled in my speech. Because from the mouth comes a lot of dangerous things. Yeah.
I would say that here again, peeking behind the curtain on this Titus 10, one of the things that Paul writes about as well is that godly men need to possess zeal. Now, it's one of the things that I've had to do in controlling that zeal is that zeal is just not being active, but it's about having passion. Having zeal is actually the enthusiasm to pursue that cause or objective that you really are passionate about. But godly zeal wants to serve God, and godly zeal wants to move. Godly zeal does not want to stand still. Godly zeal wants to be there, and what it is, it must be in direct proportion with that pursuit of God. But to have self-control of that zeal, I think is just as important.
Yeah, that's good. As we wrap up, guys, we're going to go into a quote that Stephen gave us during one of his Man Night talks. And the idea is that identity fuels discipline. And so Stephen's quote was that you are not a victim of your circumstances. You are a son of God and a warrior for the kingdom. And I just think it's important to remember that men who know who they are in Christ can walk in self-control and confidence. And so that's just a little summary of maybe some of the stuff we talked about. But here's some rapid fire questions like we've done before. I got 5 of them. Number 1, what's a litmus test that is a giveaway that you are drifting from self-control?
I told you this before. If you look at my office or my car, you
you told me that.
You can see how well I'm doing. I'm usually a mess if I'm not in my rhythms, if I'm not like living, have those constructs of schedule and self-controlled time, which then trickles down to everything else for me.
Yeah, I would say when you begin to react rather than respond.
Yeah.
So when those internal guardrails start to kind of melt away from the self-discipline, you become weak.
Yep.
I think mine is my morning mood. So in the mornings when we're making breakfast, packing lunches, packing backpacks, getting in the car, if I am just like tense and angry and like short-tempered in those, I can just tell that I have drifted from self-control in my daily routines. All right, which of these is the hardest? These are the negative, or these are the positive aspects. Hospitable, lover of good, self-controlled, upright, holy, disciplined. Which one's the hardest?
Disciplined for me.
Outright self-control.
Self-controlled. Which one's is the easiest to fall into? Arrogance, quick-tempered, drunkard, violent, greedy.
Quick-tempered.
Quick-tempered. It requires no effort. It's typically easy. And sometimes it becomes justifiable.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's just too easy.
This is a conversation me and my wife have all the time. Well, they're not listening to me, so I'm raising my voice. Yeah, well, that's not doing anybody any good.
That's right.
So,
all right, last question. How do you know that you are living a spirit-led life?
Spirit-led.
For me, I would say convictions. Like I feel like I'm convicted in a moment easier.
Spirit-led shapes desires, not behaviors. With that, I think if there ever is a sin in your life, it becomes more important to repent quicker.
That's good.
I think I'm walking in a joy, like
that's
a
good.
profound joy when I'm walking in the Spirit. There's just a peace that I experience on a deep level.
Cool. Well, guys, we'll wrap this up here. And I know in the past I've asked you 3 or 4 questions for you to kind of chew on and think on during the week, but I'm going to change it up a little bit. And as we talk through those 4 different parts to being a self-controlled man, I'm going to focus on self-awareness only because, like I said before, it's the one we've heard of the least and talk about the least. But I'm going to ask you a set of questions. I got a bunch of them written down here for you to take 1 or 2 of them and ask somebody else. And in humility, welcome their answer, take the feedback, and then apply to your own life. Number 1, what is it like to be parented by me? Number 2, what is it like to be married to me? What is it like to work with me? What is it like to live next door to me? What is it like to be my friend? What is it like to get texts from me? What is it like to do holidays with me? What is it like to be on a date with me? And what is it like to be my friend? So take those, rewind this, and pick 1 or 2 of them out. Ask a friend, ask a neighbor, ask your wife, whoever it is, and just learn about yourself and then ask God what he wants to do with it. Man, I'm grateful for you. Warren Belvedere is better because of you. As you go, we go. And so I'm just grateful for you. I hope today was encouraging and challenging as always. And I hope you'll kind of hear our heart behind what's coming up for men in the book of Titus. I hope that you'll sign up for it and register for it. I hope to see you on Friday mornings starting in January.